Hey church, good morning and thank you for joining. If this is your first time today, hello. Great day in Mandela Bay. Wherever you're watching from, I hope you're having a great day too. Our 10:30 slot on Thursdays is devoted to our charity foundation and cheering on and supporting other charities we connect with, and so whether they're part of this church or another. So really excited to share some of the things that Ryan has been working with and on, connecting with somebody called Adrian today. Phenomenal person, great project, something global across the African continent especially. You'll really be interested to know how people are connecting to make a difference, and the caring is sharing love that somebody commented on that is happening in our metro and across the continent, perhaps around the world. Our hope in sharing this is that you might find some plug-in, some place that resonates with you, or you might recognize the value of collaboration. When we all do something together, we do it better, right? And so looking forward to being able to share that with you in a moment. Give everybody a few minutes to jump on board and say hello. While we do that, there is a phone number appearing on your screen. It's how you can get hold of us via WhatsApp. Ryan's interview today with Adrian Risto. It's going to be awesome. And that's the WhatsApp number to get hold of a pastor. Also, if you want to get hold of our foundation, you can pop off an email. I'll ask our staff to give you an email address on the comment section on both platforms, Facebook and YouTube. And if you've got a contribution you want to make or you want to get involved, that's how you do it. Now, right now, Father's House is running another project. We're running a collection of clothing and non-perishables for our shelters in Mandela Bay and surrounding areas. And so there's a drop-off point at church in North End in Port Elizabeth. And you can find the details of that on our Facebook page and website. So that's our new project. Incidentally, Ryan tells me that after his interview on Coffee and Coffee for Heroes a couple of days ago, a German organization bought an additional 1,000 cups of coffee to distribute to frontline workers in the medical profession. So you guys purchased 2,000 cups individually and an additional 3,000 cups of coffee going out to medical staff, doctors, nurses, admin staff, and paramedics. We want to say we care about you putting yourselves at risk so we can be healthy. So thank you so much for doing that, and well done to everybody for your participation, for jumping on board and making everybody's life a little better. Tonight is the last broadcast of the day, 3 today, 7:30 p.m. wholehearted at your home, but quite possibly from my home. I think Vincent's going to come here to the studio and do it from here. I hope he will. So those are the 3 slots today. Tomorrow we have 2 slots. We have the conversation at 10 for tea, the devotion, and we have youth at 7:30 p.m. High schools taking place tomorrow. So looking forward to that as well. Nothing on Saturday, but of course, church on Sunday. It's going to be a good one. Thank you very much for jumping on board, everybody. There are details about our website page and the email address listed on the comments section. So if you're keen to connect with us, find out about things, that's how you can do it. All of these videos are kept on the YouTube channel and our Facebook page, but probably easier to find on YouTube. So if you know somebody who'd be interested, share it and let them have a look. Or if you want to do a catch up and watch at another time, please do that. Wherever you're watching from and whenever you watch, please comment and say hello. We'd love to stay connected during this whole coronavirus situation. Alrighty, everybody, thank you for joining. Say hello to one another. Stay connected in the comment section. You're going to love what's happening in Africa. If you're looking for good news, this is some of it. Here is our foundation clip for today.
So I'm sitting today with Adrian Risto. He's the project director of The Last Mile. He's also been a great friend and someone I've bounced a lot of ideas on. And actually, when we first started our Barista Academy, he was the one that kind of put the handbrake on us for a little bit and introduced us to Ina and Walter Richards from Work for a Living, which made us really dive into the social problems of unemployment. So I'll always be grateful to Adrian for that. But a little about the project Last Mile. You're doing amazing work there. I think we're not going to get into too much detail. People can read up on that. I want to get into some interesting questions with you. But Adrian, maybe you can give us the 3 points of what the project Last Mile really concentrate on.
Hi, Ryan, and hi to anyone who's watching. Yeah, Ryan, as Ryan said, we go back a little bit of a way. Both attended a fine educational institution in the Eastern Cape as well, the same one. So have that in common as well. So Project Last Mile, in a nutshell, essentially is an initiative that looks at leveraging private sector experience, and particularly experience from the business model that the Coca-Cola system applies across Africa to achieve 3 main goals. The first one is improving access to key medicines that can prevent and treat diseases, particularly things like malaria, TB, HIV/AIDS, and diseases that vaccines can prevent. Secondly, to help to create demand for health services that are available, particularly in those disease categories as well. And then thirdly, and an important goal is that we'd like to inspire other private sector entities to do similar types of projects. So that's to really leverage their core capabilities for good, for social good.
And just to let everyone know, you guys are operating all over Africa. The thing that really catches my attention is the first one you spoke about, which is the distribution of medical supplies around Africa. What I really love about what you guys are doing is this connection between business and social needs and how you're sort of bridging that gap. The CocaCola Logistics channel has been such an interesting way for you guys to get medicine to the rural parts of Africa. Maybe tell us a bit about how that came about and a bit about the detail of that.
Sure. So many people may or may not know that there's massive donor organizations that do incredible work in terms of raising funds to make medicines available to African countries. So we work with a few of those partners, and I might mention them a little bit later, but what they do is raise funds for preventable and treatable diseases, and they then need to make sure that they get to the point of need. So the point of need in this case would be, in the business case, it would be your consumer that's going to buy your product. In the case of medicines, it's to the clinic where, a mom or dad's bringing along a child, if it was a sick child or a child that, may contract a certain disease. They need to know that what they want to get is actually available, instead of being locked in a warehouse somewhere where it could have actually treated that particular disease. So I think few organizational systems or few business systems achieve the type of reach like Coke does across the continent. Let's talk Africa for now. One could apply this to any emerging market, but in terms of Africa, the reach is incredible for a whole lot of reasons that we won't enter into on this call. But around 2009, 2010, we were given the opportunity, a group of us, to explore how we could leverage Coke's ability to achieve that reach across the continent and apply that to medicines, essentially. So one of our partners, the Global Fund, which does incredible work in TB, AIDS, and malaria eradication. In fact, their objective is to eradicate those 3 diseases by 2030. So they brought us a particular challenge in Tanzania where they had invested a tremendous amount of money, a few $100 million in medicines, which weren't getting to the point of need through an audit that they had just completed. And so we took a step back and looked at, with a whole lot of stakeholders from government, from NGOs, the business itself, and looked at the Coke model and said, what aspects of that model could be leveraged for the benefit of ensuring that medicines are available when they need it. And particularly, it's a travesty of justice if someone's diagnosed with malaria, gets to the clinic closest to them and there's no malaria medication that could treat them, because the malaria is a treatable disease. You should not die of malaria if you take that medicine.
I think a lot of people don't kind of make that connection. They think if there is drugs and medicine available, then those people should be able to quite easily get it. And you can imagine in the rural parts of Africa, that's difficult. I've done a little bit of traveling in Africa, and I'm always amazed.
Yeah.
No matter where you go, there's a Coca-Cola sign and some vendor selling a can of Coke, and the can of Coke is cold.
Yeah, absolutely. No, 100%. And so, so the three categories that we saw, there's a couple of things that business system does really well. Number one, they create brands that people love and want. And so part of what gets those brands out to those communities is because the communities really want them. So they've done good marketing. Secondly, they then have excellent logistics systems to ensure that they could get the product out to the point that it's required. And then you're speaking about cold. I mean, you're right. You find a cold Coke in places where things just aren't cold out there. It's hot. There's limited electricity. And that's an interesting example of like a capability that we explored and saw that would make a huge difference. So when vaccines need to be made available in those same places, they have to be kept in a specific temperature range. It's only between about 2 and 8 degrees for them to remain effective. There's a dire consequence. It's not great to get to somewhere and there's not a cold Coke, but it's, at worst case, you maybe don't enjoy that experience. But if a vaccine isn't kept in that temperature range, there's this false sense of being protected against a disease that actually isn't actually correct. And so across the continent, the way Coke keeps those products cold is by doing an incredible job at managing refrigeration across the continent in difficult situations. So, for example, we did a project recently in Nigeria where the local bottler in the country has over 90,000 refrigerators out in the market, working 99.5% of the time. But in those same environments, we didn't do a project across the whole country, just in one of the states. The vaccine refrigerators were only working 70% of the time. So that means that, almost up to a third of the time, there's a challenge for a healthcare worker to keep the vaccine in the right temperature range. And all we did was take Coke's approach, call it the best practice of what were the maintenance processes, what were all of the planning that went around it, making sure that their system worked, virtually all the time versus 70% of the time, and applied it to that particular state in Nigeria. We were able to get the Coke teams to fix the majority of the broken refrigerators. We found around about 30% of them not working. They were able to be fixed, and we were able to demonstrate that, simply taking that practice from the private sector, applying it into the government environment, public health sector, could make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's amazing to see that once people start thinking about how to solve problems quite efficiently, you can not only use the practices of business, but also start working together with business. I did some reading up and chatting about this topic as well, and I see that Coca-Cola also started incentivizing the drivers to make sure that the vaccines actually got to where they needed to go, and you guys used that logistics chain.
Yeah, I mean, you can use there is a way to use the private sector chain directly, but our main goal is actually to equip. I'm a little bit nervous of private sector taking over responsibility of public sector. There's some specific situations where that could be applied, but mostly there's actually just tremendous learning that you can take, and what you want to do is equip those people whose responsibility it is to get vaccines, in this case, out to their constituents, which is the public, essentially accessing them through clinics, just to do their job better by helping them with good process. And that's what our teams try and do, is facilitate that knowledge transfer, to take the process, sometimes even to share the service provider, that's providing that service with. That's why I use the term the Coke system rather than just Coke itself.
Okay.
They don't necessarily do it themselves. They use a lot of third-party suppliers, providers, which also creates tremendous employment actually in those countries for small to medium-sized businesses. So I think the key there is actually the transference of capability, making sure that the people actually responsible for those jobs can do it to the best of their ability.
For sure, I understand. I think that's great. A lot of what you've done is within the HIV response. This seems to be a topic that's been off the table for the last couple of years. I think mainly because the response was so good when HIV did become a huge problem. But maybe just fill everyone in as to how successful that has been. I mean, we're sitting in a moment now where we're worrying and don't know the future of say, COVID-19. But if we look back to the history of the response we actually have had to HIV and AIDS, it's actually quite phenomenal. You were giving me some numbers and stats to show how impressive the world did respond to that.
Absolutely, and I think it's really something that we can take hope from for the current COVID crisis, because the HIV virus has really been one of the most complicated ones for the health sector to deal with, number one. And secondly, if you track back to the early 1980s or mid 1980s when HIV and the link between HIV and AIDS was really discovered, there's tremendous stigmas, negativity towards HIV, and judgment on the community of people that contracted HIV that really got us off to quite a rocky start. So I was recently actually watching, through some work that we did with an organization called RED, the movie Philadelphia, which was launched about 25 years ago with Tom Hanks, Denzel Washington, it played a significant role actually in highlighting, I guess, the impact and the plight of HIV around the world, and actually encourage anybody who hasn't watched that movie, because it is quite a long time ago. It was relaunched last year. It's worth a watch because it really shows you how far we've come, and some incredible story of humanity actually comes through in Philadelphia. So, but essentially, up until about the early 1990s, HIV was basically a death sentence. There was no cure. People contracted HIV and they died. It's basically, unless some sort of miraculous way that people overcame the disease from a pure medical perspective, it was like 100% death rate. It was just a matter of time. Through massive application of minds and science going behind it, today, well, actually, I'll give you a contrasting figure. Since 2004 to now, HIV-related deaths have reduced by 60%. There's around 38 million, I think 32 million people have died of HIV since it was first discovered. And there's roughly 38 million people in the world today living with HIV. Treatment has evolved to such a degree that most people can actually live completely normal lives if they take the antiretroviral treatment that's available in the right way. And obviously you have to make some lifestyle changes as well in many instances. But that's the incredible story, from being a definite death sentence to actually being able to live with HIV. And when a lot of people contract HIV, there's been huge mother to child transmission. Like, people are contracting it through some means that there's nothing in their behavior that has actually resulted in them contracting HIV, and they actually now can live a normal life. So it may be quite useful to know that in South Africa actually has the highest number of HIV people of any country in the world, and a lot of people don't realize it. So it's something we should take seriously. There's roughly 7 million HIV positive people in the country. We have the highest number of HIV people on treatment of any country in the world. And key on this is it's actually therefore also a story of humanity, in that the majority of our people on treatment are funded by outside countries that really care. And so a lot of those are first world countries that fund our HIV program.
Yeah, those are stories that kind of fall off the wagon we don't hear about. I mean, it was amazing when you were telling me the other day about the response that particularly the US and the Bill Gates Foundations and what they're doing and how much, or it was how much money is being put into HIV and AIDS still.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of help coming from outside, from the US and various other first world countries to Africa and to South Africa. What are you've worked with both sides as well. What are the assumptions that are being made about third world countries from first world countries that are maybe incorrect?
Yeah. The first, I mean, let's look at it first from a first world to third world environment. So, or one could actually say, more affluent part of society, because I don't necessarily think it's even just third world. It's people that perhaps aren't exposed to the realities of living third world. In South Africa we have both. So I'd say the first assumption that I see is that the first world assumes that the third world doesn't understand or don't understand their problems and don't necessarily have good ideas of how to solve them. So that's problematic, because that assumption then leads to a telling mentality rather than a co-creation of the solution mentality. So that's probably the biggest incorrect assumption that I regularly see. From a perspective of the third world to the first world, would be a mistrust of motive. So, just because the first world wants to, provide funding, it takes a long time, even in our projects, for us to get traction, even if you're bringing some funding and a solution, to build the necessary trust that your motive is pure. And, on that note, I see even with the COVID crisis, there's so many conspiracy theories going around on social media. And I really just want to urge everyone to make sure that they do their own homework and research before they just start reposting stuff that they see on social media. Some things can come across looking like they've been proven in research, but they aren't necessarily true. So, those are so it's finding the balance between, like, ensuring that from a first world perspective, that part of the world isn't just trying to impose solutions on Africa without taking the time to journey with people on the ground. And I know you experience this through the programs that you do through the Libre Foundation as well. It's like, there's an education issue for sure. And sometimes you've got to help people to properly diagnose their problem. But then the best solution is a co-created solution, because it achieves buy-in as well, rather than an imposed solution. So I think that's the place you want to get to, is build trust, don't make assumptions, understand the context properly, and then co-create a solution.
So you used an interesting word just now, which has sparked an idea in my head. Not necessarily talking about first world or third world. I mean, we can relate this to privileged and non-privileged. So even within a country like South Africa, you've got such disparity between the people with money and without money. We probably see, and a lot of us are probably guilty of that same mentality almost, we're making unconscious assumptions that people can't come up with great ideas or change their circumstances, and that they need people, and then people end up just telling them what to do, or even giving advice when it's not asked for. Whereas the co-creation and sitting with people to understand how people can get out of the situation or out of the poverty they're in. I think that's so interesting in the co-creation side of things, how sometimes the privileged or the first world countries need to stop and listen and go, okay, these people do understand their problems and they actually have the best solution to get out of it. They just need help from a support point of view or financial point of view.
Yeah. I think it's about trying to facilitate them to a solution rather than trying to, feel like you've given them the solution. It's a natural tendency as humans. We like to be right, and we like to, it gives us a sense of personal satisfaction if we feel like we've provided the solution, but it actually isn't necessarily the best way of achieving, like you got to decide what's your goal. Your goal isn't necessarily to prove your solution right. It's actually to get the necessary buy-in that something is implemented. Because I see a world in the NGO world that's filled with great ideas that aren't actually bought into and implemented. So I don't think we are living at the moment, I don't think we're in the moment that's requiring lots of new big ideas. I actually think coming up with ideas, with all due respect, isn't necessarily the hard part. It's actually the excellence in execution of the idea, which is almost the differentiator these days, I would say.
Okay, and that's where the connection between business and social must collide and must work together. I think Coke was the great example of they helped execute, or their business practices helped execute the idea of getting medicine across. I'm quite interested.
Exactly, those practices have been refined over 80 years. So, no need to go reinvent the wheel. So, take those learnings. You don't have to make the same mistakes, but still co-create them. So don't necessarily just impose those processes. Take them, customize them, change them, give them a unique flavor, and that's probably the best way to get to sort of execution excellence.
Yeah. Okay. Just to flip things a little bit to you on a personal level, what has changed since working in this industry between business and social? You've been doing this for over 10 years now. What changes have you seen?
There is definitely a greater understanding that both sides can learn from each other. So when I first started out, you'd find you'd attend a lot of frustrating meetings with people speaking right past each other. Those from a social background, you're passionate about their causes, waxing lyrical, but not necessarily within the most structured manner. And I know I'm generalizing now, because there's people that are just by personality more structured. So this is a generalization, and then business people coming in incredibly impatient to with that world, with the social world that seemed to take so long to make decisions and debated everything into the ground. So from both sides, there definitely has been a coming together, from a business side, learning the patience to understand problems properly and to realize the context that government people and NGOs operating in is very different to in the private sector. If it's your own business, you can decide to make a change. You can go make that change tomorrow. You can't do that in government environments, and when you're working with public money. And secondly, NGOs that are responsible to boards of trustees with various different ideas. So there's been a definite moving together. The other thing I think I've seen is and learned from is tremendous resilience that you see from people that are determined, to get over some of the social hurdles or social challenges that we just haven't seemed to crack for the last, let's say 10, 20 years. So, massive resilience that sees resistance that's put in their way as more like a speed bump than a stop sign, for want of a terrible analogy. But you've got to have the passion to really believe in your cause to such a degree that you will change course, if and adapt to the environment if you feel like it's necessary to achieve your ultimate goal. So those are the things that I've experienced. When I first got into this world, a few times we'd be embarking on an idea and a project, and you'd feel like you're getting blocked, and you'd maybe feel quite despondent and almost just give up. There's definitely a chance that you might give up, but there's always a way. If the purpose and the cause is important enough, and you really feel convicted that you are on the right path, you'll find a way. I know you found the same with a lot of the programs you've been involved in. I mean, if I think about some of the discussions we've had over time, where it looked like it was the end of the road, but it seldom is. Normally it means just finding a new road.
Finding a new path, or finding another person who will get involved as well, different angle you take or different lens. You've touched on so many amazing topics, which I could honestly speak for hours. I'm very passionate about these. You took using words like purpose and resilience and those type of things, which I love those topics, and maybe we can discuss them more in the future. But so just to finish off,
sure. Each one could be a discussion. You're right. Each one of those topics we could spend a long time on.
But I think just to finish off, then I want to ask you, what's the smallest thing that someone has done that's made you feel good about humanity or just being human?
That's a real tough question. So I'm going to just swing for the first thing that comes to mind, because there's two. So the one is actually, I see it actually in my Project Last Mile team. I mean, I ask them to go to some of the most difficult places in the world. In those old days when we could fly places, they would be onto a plane within a day or two if we had an opportunity in some really tough countries. I mean, we've done some projects in countries that were that were hit by Ebola a few years ago. And so that's quite a ask of someone to go to a country like that soon after an Ebola crisis. And so just to see the willingness of people to go and help is incredible to me, at personal sacrifice. But just thinking of one particular story that helps me to every day, open up the laptop and, get cracking on the work that we do. The moment of truth for us, we can have lots of discussions. We can raise funds. We can work with these incredible organizations. And I wish I had more time to actually tell you about them, because they're the ones whose work we support. But the moment of truth for us is like when that medicine or that vaccine actually is at a clinic. And so you can get so excited if we go to like a rural environment that's incredibly hard to get to, and actually see the thing there. And we came across this one lady, her name's Veronica, who's a healthcare worker in a rural part of Mozambique. And her story sort of typifies this for me. She gets up at 5 a.m. every morning. She's got a couple of children and she's got one quite young baby. She normally takes the baby with her, straps the baby on her back, gets on a bicycle and rides about 2 hours to a medical center to go pick up various types of medicines, but particularly medicines for HIV patients. She's got 12 HIV patients that she has to look after. That's her job. And she rides about 10 kilometers a day on this bicycle through the most incredible paths in like jungle looking type terrain in Mozambique to deliver this medicine to these people, to keep them alive, on a daily basis. And while because they're taking the medicine, you might not think that they're being saved on a daily basis. They are actually, because if they stop taking that medication, the disease will develop. So, what it makes you think about is like Veronica doesn't know all the things that happen, like to get the medicines to that clinic. She just goes there and hopefully it's there. It's for projects like ours and for government people to make sure that we are utilizing whatever influence has been given to us or resources in our hands to make sure that when she goes to that clinic, that HIV medication is there. And then, the humanity side is just seeing the joy with which someone like her does their role. They build such tight bonds with these communities that have got literally like so little in terms of access to the types of things that we do on a daily basis. So that's the type of thing that makes me feel good about humanity. When I understand, because I've been privileged to understand the chain that sits behind getting that stuff, to that part of the country. I mean, that one can't help but feel, a sense of sort of pride in how far we've come. And something else that I've learned is, you asked me a little bit about I think, assumptions that are made. The other assumption that's made as well is that people don't really care around the world. That there's so much corruption across the continent, and that people don't care. But you look at people like Veronica. I've come across doctors working in the most trying situations and nurses in the most trying situations across the continent, making a plan. The old South African saying, a boer maak 'n plan. I've seen that everywhere, and it's testimony to those heroes on the ground that millions more people haven't died of diseases over time. So we shouldn't see Africa as a basket case that is just needing this first world like influence to survive. It can survive, and it does survive. We got to move it from just survival to prosperity, and that's the goal that should be in place for all of us.
Yeah, I agree. I've asked this question about what's the smallest thing that makes you feel good about humanity to a few people now, and I'm getting a common theme, which is really cool. Is basically everyone's saying a story where they stopped, looked someone in the eye, and did something for them, and that was just that transfer of human to human humanity, helping someone, seems to be the thing that everyone remembers. So it's really encouraging to see whether you are the person delivering the medicine and riding a bicycle. It's that actual touch point with a human that makes it worthwhile and makes us keep going.
And maybe key there is like not underestimating the role that everyone can play. I mean, you might be anywhere along that supply chain. You might be the accountant sitting in the Global Fund that's releasing the funding to Mozambique that starts the chain of events that eventually gets to the Veronica. The same could apply to any of us in business. Don't underestimate the role that you can play to sort of capacitate someone else to achieve the final goal, or of doing good.
Oh, for sure. And you've helped me do that too in the past. So I must say thank you. I can pass it on one day.
Sure thing.
But,
Thanks,
Adrian, awesome chatting to you. Hopefully we'll have a few more of these conversations going forward.
Anytime. And just a shout out to the work being done on, Coffee for Heroes and also Project Unity. I've personally just experienced a little bit of that in PE, and I think those are examples. We could dig into the same way on principles that we've done for Project Last Mile on each of those. So, great stuff being done on your side and on Father's House side as well. There.
Thanks, man. Have a good day.
Hey, thank you so much, everybody, for watching that, our foundation clip for Thursday morning. One more today, 7:30 p.m., wholehearted at home. I'll see you then. Goodbye, everybody.